Okay, so I've been asked by a friend of mine to put some weathering onto this Loco. This is a British Rail Class 31 Loco in the blue scheme, obviously. But as you can see, it's come straight out of the box from Hornby, and it's in relatively crisp and clean condition. So these Locos were heavily used, so we should really try and reflect that in our model and try and give it a good bit of weathering and some detailing where we can, just to bring it out of the box a little bit. Some quite easy techniques. If you've watched my other video on Little Fish Fan, you'll see what we did there. We're not going to do this one quite as heavily. Friends asked for this to be done relatively lightly, so we'll give it it won't be so heavy-handed on this one, but we'll still be able to demonstrate the technique. So what we're going to do with this one first off is give it a good coat of a grimy, sooty, browny black colour all up underneath the running gear, the chassis, and extend that to just onto the blue. There's a little row of rivets there you might not be able to see just under this louver vent here. We'll bring it up the sides of the body just to there. Looking at photos of the real deal, that was quite common to have that dirt and grime come up to about that level. We'll also do a little bit on the end panels here too, across the yellow. We'll definitely get the couplings and the buffers included in that grime wash. For the rest of the body, we're going to give that a little bit of a black wash, just to bring out some of the details and the recesses. We'll give it some silver touch-ups and some dry brushing a bit later too, to bring out some of the detail on the black so it stands out a little bit better. We'll cover all of these louvers and vents. We'll make them nice and grimy as well, again just to reflect what's seen on the real thing. Turning over to the roof, we're just going to give that a bit of a light going over, not as heavy as underneath the chassis. We're going to weather that across this way as we come across, so that we naturally follow the pattern that any rain marks might leave on the top of the cab there, coming down either side, and we'll finish up with some little streaks coming down in vertical rows as well, just to give it a bit more of a dirty look, more of a prototypical look. Okay, what we're going to use, pretty much the same as last time. We need a little mixing palette there. I may or may not use the lacquer thinners, not sure if we'll need that one. We've got some isocol. At the end, we'll give it a good flat coat, just to take away any shine that might be there and just to bring everything back to the same sort of sheen. A selection of paints here. Colours aren't really that important, and you don't need a particular shade. I've just gone for an earth brown colour here that we're going to mix up into that wash later. I've got a light gold grey this time, and also a neutral grey that we may use for some dry brushing. A little bit of steel here, although I hate to use silver and aluminium colours, that type of thing. We are going to use a little bit of that today just to bring out a couple of little details. We've just got some black there as well. We'll use that to make our little wash. The wash we do today is going to be different to last time. We used an enamel wash with oil-based paints last time, with oil paints. We're not going to do that this time. We're going to keep it all acrylic-based. It's going to be a little bit more forgiving should things not go exactly to plan on someone else's locomotive today, so we don't want to have any mishaps there. To make our grime up under the bottom, we're going to use a couple of Tamiya lacquer paints here, or one lacquer paint and one acrylic. Again, probably should be a darker brown, but I'm working with the dark yellow I've got today and a bit of black. We're going to mix them with that Tamiya lacquer thinner. Make that quite thin, and again that's going to get sprayed all up underneath. These other little bottles at the back, this one is simply a bottle of water in a little dropper bottle, and I've just added the tiniest little bit of dishwashing liquid to that. That's just going to break up surface tension. We're going to use that in our wash, but by adding the dishwashing liquid, it's going to ensure that it flows through all the little crevices that we need it to. So that's what that one is. This one here is just it's a pre-mixed wash that I've made up a couple of weeks ago, just from a combination of black and dark brown chalk pastels. Mixed in with a bit of water, and again just a little bit of dishwashing liquid to break any surface tension, and we just slap that on the model. We might use that on the roof today. Okay, chalk pastels I just mentioned. So again, just a grimy mixture of brown and black, just crushed up with a hammer or a brick or whatever you can find. What we want is the powder out of that. Don't worry if you haven't got all the granules out of it. We'll get them later. We're going to probably dry brush them across the top of the roof and out of some of those vents too. And we'll fix that in place today with hopefully with some Microsol. Haven't tried this one before, but we'll give this a go. I couldn't get any Humbrol Decal fix at the moment, so we're going to see if the Microsol work. If not, we have other ways. Equipment for today, we have 3 little brushes is all we really need for today. This is a number 5, doesn't really matter about the size, but you just want a brush that's going to be decent enough that you can, you know, slot that wash all through the vents and over the roof, that type of thing. So you need a bigger brush for that. We've got a fine pointed detail brush. In this case it's only a number 2, but that'll be enough for us to do any fine work that we need to do. And lastly, we've just got an old ragged brush that we've dragged out of the box. Bristles are a bit tatty on it, well worn and quite splayed. We're going to use that for dry brushing. That'll be perfect for dry brushing, that one. And dry brushing with the technique that we use, as you'll see soon, dry brushing does have a tendency to wear out your brushes a lot. But there's lots of life left in this one yet, so don't go using any really good brushes. Ones that are a bit tatty are probably better than anything. And as always, a little bit of paper towel. Cutting surface I'm using, work surface I'm using today, again, will just be a large flat tile, very easy to clean off. Alright, so we'll crack on, we'll get onto it. I'm just going to pause now and we'll duck over to the spray booth and we'll give that first coat of grime up underneath the Class 31 there. I'll be back. Okay, so at the spray bench, I'm just going to give the 31 now a good going underneath with some grime. So we're going to make that out of some Tamiya lacquer thinner, and we're going to add to the Tamiya lacquer thinner some dark yellow acrylic, and I've just got some black lacquer here. It's okay to mix these two together. Lacquer thinner is already ready to go in the paint cup there, so we'll just give this a quick stir. And you want this mix to be quite thin. The lacquer paints from Tamiya are great, but they just need a little bit more thinner than perhaps you normally would. There's no recipe for these. It doesn't have to be, you know, certain parts black to certain parts brown. Just mix up a grimy color that you're happy with. Look at your reference photos again if you need to. But as long as it's sort of a grimy mix, it should do the job for us. Okay, could do with a touch more brown in there, because we are going to put this on quite lightly. Okay, not sure if you can see that, but we're basically going for, you know, quite a milky consistency, and it's more a dark grimy grey than a grimy black. Let's just give that a little bit of a test shot before we put it on the model. That's good. Okay, now we're going to start underneath, and we're going to be careful that we don't get too much on the actual running part of the wheel, because we're going to come back and take that off very shortly. Alright, so we'll start up under these boxes. A small blockage in there. It's still a bit hard to see at this stage with the colour of it going onto the grime, so we may need to increase the brown just a little bit more. I'm just going to give it several light coats. Okay, so it might be hard to see against that darker blue colour, but we've got that grime coming just up to about the row of where that louver is in the centre, just about the bottom of that, and along those rivers, just in a wavy pattern. We're going to repeat that on the other side as well, and we're going to come back and get the ends. Okay, so that's just the first layer of grime that we've put on. That's about all it needs. Again, it's going to be lightly with this one. Apologies for the airbrush playing up a little bit. I don't know what was going on there, but got the job done. Alright, on to the next bit. Okay, so what I've decided to do with this one, slight change of plans on the roof. I'm liking the way that grimy colour is looking down the bottom, so I've just altered it slightly, and we're going to come back and do the roof with a very similar colour, but not quite the same. And we're going to go very lightly across the top here. Okay, don't know if you can see that, it might be a little bit hard to see. I've tried to sort of waffle that across the top of the cab there. Just so it's going to pick up, any of those rain marks. The rain's naturally going to fall off in a certain direction. It's not going to sit along to the cab. So I've done that to start with. It's kind of given it sort of a missing rib type effect. And then I've gone for an overspray across the whole lot. So it's all weathered, some just a little bit more than others in certain places. And then I've come back again and just tried to extend it down the sides slightly. I will leave the louvers and that for the next. We'll let the wash do the job there for us. Right, back in a sec. Okay, so moving on with the next stage, what we're going to do now is make up a little wash, a little dark grimy wash, and we're going to put that all over the sides of the body. We'll run it into the roof as well. We'll keep clear of the running gear down the bottom. We'll leave that well alone now. We don't want to affect any of the road wheels down there for that. So to make our little wash, what we're going to do first is just a little bit of the water with the dishwashing liquid in it, just the tiniest little dash of dishwashing liquid, just again to break up that surface tension. So just going to give it a few drops of that one. And you want this to be quite thin. You can always add to it, just using a mixture of black and brown acrylic paints. Doesn't really matter what colours you've got. This is just a dark earth type colour I use on RAF Spitfires basically. So a couple of drops of black, 3. And for this one, probably about the same. Again, it's just a grimy mixture you want. What we're looking for here is probably consistency of roughly milk, and just a grimy colour that's going to go into all those panel lines. There we go. So not black, not straight out black. Straight out black can look a little bit too raw, too much, bit of overkill. So this colour's going to match in quite well with our roof colour and with that darker colour that we've, the lighter colour that we put across the chassis. Just to quickly show you, I don't know if you can see how well you can see it. You can see that lighter grime colours come up the sides there quite nicely. It sort of matches reference photos I've looked at, and we've got the effect across the top of the roof. The colour's slightly different. Okay, and I've tried to sort of wave it across in ripples there too. So we haven't done the whole lot. Then what we've done is we come back over the lot very lightly, just to make sure that all parts of it are covered. So I'm going to get this wash on the brush, and I'm just going to put it into all of the louvers to start with. We'll start there, it's a good starting point. Okay, so just lightly get it into all those louvers, and the plan is we're going to come back and take it out again, or off the top. So we want to leave the acrylic paint wash in the recesses. We'll do the bottom of that step there. We'll get into those as well. And we'll try and confine this mixture at the moment to those louvers. Try and get into those corners. We'll try and keep it off the rest of the body where we can. Doesn't matter if you spill a bit, go over the edge, because we're going to take care of that shortly. It's going to come back off. So we'll get it into all those louvers, and as it dries, it's just going to sit in all those recesses, and we should just be able to come back with, say, a cotton tip and just take it back off the high portions. And then after that, when it's completely dry, we're going to come over it with the dry brush, and that's definitely going to take care of the high points anyway, and leave our darker wash in the recesses. So you can see it's a pretty easy technique, this one, to do. You just got to try and stay in the lines. If we're going to get all these little footholds too, they'll be good to get. And at the side of the cab. Okay, that's one side. So we're just really looking for any of that recessed detail that we can pick out with these. Don't worry about those. Alright, have a look at the ends. There's a little bit there we can pick out too. Across the yellow though, you need to be a little bit careful. So we'll take any overpainting straight off those surfaces. So it goes on a little bit messy, but as you can see it tidies up quite quickly. Maybe just across here too. And if we keep that coming off in a down motion, it'll help us achieve those rain marks we've been looking for. So it's just picked up a little bit of the detail in there. Again, we're not going for a heavy wash on this one. And I'm going to steer clear of those windows. We could spend some time and mask up the surfaces where the wiper blades would have contact, but that's not what we're after on this particular job. So there we go. And we'll just get those roof vents as well. And when that dries, hopefully the darker colour should sit right down in every little hole that we've got there, and bring some depth to that particular colour. We'll do these walkways. And we'll get around this framing here, these panel lines. Really good. This wash is really good with panel lines. And we'll get these ones that come across here as well. Just lightly. Just so it sits in the recess and we can take the rest off. Okay. Just dabbing away the larger portions of overpaint on there, and the rest will come off very, very shortly. All right. Okay, so with the aid of a hairdryer, we've been able to get that dry quite rapidly. Now what we're going to do is come back and take some of that wash back off. Now for that one, we've got some Windex, just normal window cleaner in here. Add a dash of water if you think it might be a little bit too strong. It's really good for thinning paint. as long as you don't go too overboard with it. You can use it in your washers or even through the airbrush, I do sometimes, and we're going to use it now just on the end of a cotton tip, just to take off some of that over painting, just some of that wash that's sitting outside of those recesses. So we're going to come back gradually and just take it out of all of those lines where we can. So I know the colours are hard to see when it's dark grey against dark blue, but if we just rub that gently across that surface there and then use the other end to come across it as well, you can see it's just starting to take some of that paint off those flat surfaces. Now just be careful when you're doing this, you don't rub too hard that you actually rub through and rub some of that paint off, so it'll be disastrous. And so it's taking it off the high surfaces and it's leaving it in those recesses still, which is exactly what we're after. And that won't affect that spray layer of grime we put under, because that was done with enamels, lacquer paints. You can also use a little bit of paper towel or toilet paper for this one as well, where you need to rub it off. That'll be a bit quicker for us today. I'm going to leave it in those vents though. And obviously, the less paint you use in your wash, the easier it will be to take off at the other end. Can also do that with a little bit of alcohol. I've got a couple of stubborn ones there. Just going to go very lightly on the end of a cotton tip with a little bit of alcohol and see if that moves them. Yeah, that takes it back straight away. Takes off that layer of grime too, so we won't do that. Try and blend him in a bit more. But you get the idea anyway. So if we put it on lightly, we can come back and take it off very easily. Once again, I know it's very hard to see with the colouring that we've got there today. It's sitting in those vents quite nicely. So we'll just come down in a downwards motion across those vents and clean up between the edges. Alright. So as you can see, it's certainly dirtied up those vents as well, and when we give that a bit more of a dry brush, that's going to bring out the raised part of those shutters there, those louvers as well. Alright, so yeah, hopefully you can see that, it's settled into all of those grooves, which is where we want it to be. Okay, it's gone into the roof areas as well. I'm going to leave that coloured panel darker as a replacement panel, I think. Alright, what I'm going to do now is come back and just dry brush the highlights. So if you've seen the fish fan video, you'll know what we're doing here. This is where we use our older splayed out brush. Certainly don't want to use a good detail brush for something like this. We're getting the thicker style of paint that's in the bottle. We want to try and avoid as much moisture as we can. We're going to load the brush up, wipe it off on some paper towel numerous times, just so that we can get the paint sitting in the bristles. And we're aiming to remove 95–97% of the paint out of the brush anyway. As a good test, if you run the brush across the top of your thumbprint and it only picks up the highlighted areas, that's about right. And what we're going to do now is just come over some of these higher surfaces, things like the steps, very, very lightly. Doesn't need much at all. We're going to go over those louvers just very lightly. I'm going to pick up some of that raised detail there, through here, and again, because they're louvers, we want to be going in an up and down motion, or a downwards motion, so that we pick up most of it. You can do those little sills across there too. Pick those up. We want to go very lightly with this type of technique. We don't want to go too heavy. Okay, we'll get that louver. And the colour I'm using is just it's a light gold grey, but it could be any type of grey. Avoid white. Don't go near white if you can. White is just too extreme. So we're just very subtly, you may not even be able to see it, it's that subtle. We're just trying to pick out any edges that would suffer a bit of wear and tear, things like door handles, high use areas. We're not going to come along the bottom very much here at all, because that's coated in grime. So you're not going to see any wear effects on metal when it's coated in the grime really anyway. Okay, that's one side. So that's all it's taking. It's not taking much at all. Very, very lightly. So there's just enough paint on those bristles to pick out the highlights, and that's it. Of course, we'll get these steps. We'll get these steps here, and it's picked up some of that rivet detail there, which is nice. And we'll bring that up onto the roof. A couple of little rivets in there. Okay, need a little bit more paint on there now. And we take it all back off. So dry brushing, get rid of most of the paint, just come on very, very lightly. Now we're going to get that big louver on the top, that big vent under the fan, and that's left all of our dark wash in those recesses. It's picking up all the bolt heads. Get around the sides there, we're going to get that tread plate across the top, and those rivets coming across there, and this panel with its rows of rivets. And if you keep this technique going from side to side across the roof again, rather than along the body, again, you'll get that added benefit of having some rain marks in there as well. I'll just get the tread plate along, of course, but then we'll come across the other side. So it just picks up all the little raised details like those as well. Get in around there, get those. There's access doors that would have been opened quite regularly. We can weather them up a little bit differently to the rest of it too, just so they stand out. A bit too much. Here we go. And then what we're going to do is come back in some random areas and just try and give it some of those rain marks. We'll just come down the side, not everywhere, but just every now and again. Now this is very subtle, you'll probably only see it on a certain angle, but it will be there. Use the dry brush to pick up the angles on the end of those. Okay, and then ever so lightly, we're going to come across some of the other areas around the buffers, and the tiniest little bit underneath as well. Only a little bit. Just around those springs, just to bring out the detail on some of those springs, some of those lines, those steps. There we go. Yeah, it really brings those springs to life. See that? It just picks up all the high points on your raised detail. Okay. Just under in there. Alright, and that is it for the dry brush. Alrighty, what we're going to do now is use some of our pastels that we've ground up. So this is just a mixture of a black stick and a dark brown stick basically. Just using the same dry brush. It's been cleaned and dried. Just picking up some of that pigment in the bristles again, knocking a lot of it off because we don't want a lot of this. We don't want to slap it on. You need to be really careful of fingerprints when you're doing this. We're only going to apply this across the roof, okay? And again, we're just doing the odd streak coming down like this. That's all we really want to do. And it's the same effect as what we were doing just a moment ago with our dry brushing. This is just very, very subtle, giving it some powder across the top. This is going to knock back some of the dry brushing just a little bit and just give it an additional shade of soot up there as well. You can put it in some of your nooks and crannies if you want to. Again, just go very lightly with it because it's easy to overdo. I might put a bit more around there, 30. Okay, I'll come around to the other side, we're going to do the same. So I'm keeping those strokes vertical and just at random. Just to simulate, you know, what might be rain marks. And if you look at images of the real thing, they stand out. Just blow off some of that excess. Put a little bit around some of these vents. And just the odd one. Just the odd one down the side too. Just make sure they stay vertical. Whoopsie. I'm just going to make sure we get over those numbers, the cab numbers on here as well. Just they're very stark at the moment in the BR logo. Very stark white against a very weathered carriage now, so we just want to knock them back ever so slightly just to take the polish off those. And they look far more realistic when you just knock them back a fraction. A little bit heavy on that door, see if we can take it off. Okay, now I'm going to seal those pigments in. I'm not going to use that microsol today. You can do it with the alcohol, but I'm not going to do that today either. I'm just going to try and seal those in today with the final flat coat that we put on it. So I'm a big fan of the SMS brand I'm using at the moment. It's the first time I've tried it, and I've used a few of their colours as well, and it's quite good stuff. Very, very light coat though, because if you put too much of this on, or any of these types of things on, if you overdo it, it goes from good to, oh heck, what have I done, and it turns white. So yeah, just a light misting coat's what I'm going to put on when we get to the spray bench, and I'm going to do it from a distance. I'm not going to be as close as we would for, say, when we did the chassis. So I'm going to dirty this up a bit. There's a little bit too much dry brushing sitting across those panels. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Hopefully Trevor will be too. And again, just be very mindful of fingerprints because this powder picks it all up. Certainly looks a lot different from where we started. Now, just before we do, I'm just going to use a little bit of steel colour here, not aluminium or silver because they're just too bright. Tiniest little bit on the end of the brush, being very mindful of my fingerprints. Just going to pick up these bits that were missing in quite a prominent feature. Okay, and do the same at the other end. I'm just trying to keep my hands off that body so I just don't add the fingerprints to it. Alright, I'll leave it at that before we go too far. I'm back in a sec after the final spray. Alright, so she's had the final coat. Again, it was just the SMS Premium Flat Clear that was sprayed over. We sprayed it from a further distance away than we normally would, putting any other coat on. We just want to mist it onto the surface just so it doesn't blow all that pastel dust off. But now it's fixed on there, so hopefully the light's good enough. You can see that there's some difference to the roof. Certainly we brought some of those streaks down the body. You can certainly tell there's a bit of grime around the vents. You can see that that layer of dirty grime that we put on with the Tamiya lacquer paints up underneath as well. We've also tried to knock back those British Rail markings and cab numbers just so that they blend in with the rest of it. You can certainly see a bit of grime up on the yellow on the cab ends, that's for sure. And the other end, a bit of there, but certainly that grime on the blue certainly looks a lot different than it did when we first started, and certainly a far cry from what comes out of the box. Alright, well thanks very much for watching. Like I said, if you want to know more or learn some other techniques, check out the other video I put on the fish fan. You'll see a couple of different techniques on that one. But yeah, hopefully Trevor will be happy with that one. We'll see you next time.